Hello all, welcome back to Sunday School with Music, Magic, Messing Around with Maureen, and I'll give you a little bit of magic. Now I understand we might be getting back together at the sanctuary this upcoming Sunday, but if you feel safer at home, well, Maureen and I will do a couple of more of these videos to present during this plague season. But today we're going to tell an old Bible story featuring one of the Bible heroes. And which Bible hero out of the Old Testament is it? Arise, Bible hero. Oh, he is. And who's arising? But it's Joseph. Joseph and his Technicolor raincoat. So we'll tell a story about Joseph. So the story starts out in the tents of Israel, or the tents of Jacob, because Jacob was nicknamed Israel when he won a wrestling match with God. But that's another story. We'll get into that. But what we've got here is in the tents of Jacob, we've got Jacob and all of his sons, and he had a lot of them. Here's Jacob, and he had 12 sons. He had Reuben and Simeon, and he had a whole bunch of others, but his very favorite was Joseph. Joseph was the baby of the family, and he had 11 big brothers. So here's Joseph and his 11 big brothers. So we'll continue the story about Jacob or Israel, because Jacob had 12 sons and Joseph was the youngest. That's Joseph, Benjamin, Issachar, Judah, Zebulun, Levi, Simeon, Reuben, Asher, Gad, Dan, and Naphtali. All of these were the sons of Israel, or as you'll hear them called later, the 12 tribes of Israel, because they had a lot of family. Stay. And we'll have the boys just hang around for a while. So the story will start with what Joseph, or Israel, he gave each of his sons a beautiful coat. He gave one a coat of sky blue, and to another, he gave a coat of royal purple, and to another, he gave a beautiful green coat, and to another, a red coat, and to another, he gave a brown coat, and to another, he gave a red coat. To another, he gave a yellow coat. And to yet another, he gave a brown coat. He gave all these coats to all the different boys, and one of them got a golden yellow coat, and one of them got a white coat. They all got a coat of a solid, beautiful color. One got a coat of black. But wait, that is only 11 coats. What did he give to his favorite, the 12th? Well, what he did is he gave a coat of many colors. It had black and red and yellows and greens and purples and whites, and it was brilliant with oranges and blacks, and there was golden color, and purple was woven into it. It was a coat of many colors, or we could call it a Technicolor raincoat, because it sounds good. But he gave Joseph, the youngest, this beautiful coat. And all the big brothers, well, they were getting pretty jealous. So Joseph was also a dreamer. In fact, he was such a dreamer that the Sandman, when Joseph started to go to sleep, the Sandman must have had a whole bucket of sand because Joseph dreamed dreams. And he told his brothers about them. He told his brothers that he saw them all as stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stars for each of the brothers, and then a star for Joseph himself. And he said that when he saw these stars, they all bowed down to him. And he thought that was kind of cute. But the big brothers did not. They didn't like the idea of them bowing down to a little brother. Isn't going to happen. But Joseph continued to dream dreams. And he dreamed another time. He dreamed that they were all plants in a field. And his was upright and bright. And they had each of the other 11 plants bowed down to his. Big brothers bowing down to little brother, the youngest, the baby of the family. Not going to happen. So all the big brothers were out guarding the sheep, and Jacob was left at home. And Jacob's dad told him that, he had to get to the point and follow the map and find his big brothers and bring them some lunch. So Joseph just went in and good grief. I put the pen through the pad, through the map. So let me continue on then. So Joseph, that's going to be a mess. So Joseph wandered around trying to find his brothers. He went back, crossed the stream, and he walked through the woods, and he finally was told by somebody that his brothers had gone to a different area and that they were there. And so he stopped there to find his brothers. And his brothers saw him coming. His brothers saw him coming, and they were not that happy to see the dreamer. So what they did is they took a rope and they tied him up. They hog-tied him and were going to throw him into a pit to slowly starve to death when a bunch of merchants came by going to Egypt. And they said, why should we just let him die? Why don't we sell him as a slave, get a little bit of money for it? And they did. They asked the merchants if they wanted a little brother as a slave, and merchants said sure. They'd sell him in Egypt. And so Joseph was dragged to Egypt, far from his father, far from his family. And his brothers were a little bit happy because they took his coat of many colors, dipped it in blood, and said he was eaten by a goat. Okay, but so Joseph, when he got to Egypt, he was in and out of trouble. He did good things, and he tried to be a great person, but didn't always work out for him because he found himself again in prison. He was trapped. Joseph was in prison under false accusations, and he couldn't get out. But Joseph had this ability with dreams to interpret them. And a couple of the prisoners there had some weird dreams and asked him, and he interpreted them. And that's what got him out of prison. So Joseph got out of prison because the Pharaoh wanted to have somebody interpret his bag of dreams, because he'd been having a bunch of weird dreams and trying to figure out what they meant. He said he saw 7 fat cows get out of a stream and then 7 starving cows. He saw 7 big, full sheaves of wheat and then 7 dead ones. And he was worried. What does all this mean? And Joseph saw what it meant. He had that ability. He said, these dreams have meaning. These dreams have meaning. They mean that for 7 years, you're going to have lots of food. Things will be bountiful. There will be, your trees will bear fruit, and they'll have grapes, and you'll have all sorts of extra food. That's 3 years. For 4 years, you'll have more food, and you'll have even more food coming to you for, that's what, 5 years. For 6 and 7 years, you'll have bread aplenty. You'll have all of these foods. And in the 7th year will be the final year of good food, because after that would come 7 years of nothing. No food. Famine. Wheat would starve in the field. Cows would go hungry and die. People would starve. And so the Pharaoh said, I need to put somebody, Joseph, I want to put you in charge of collecting food during our 7 good years to make up for the 7 bad years. And so Joseph saw to it. He saw that he was given a responsibility, and so for 1 year, he collected food. And for a 2nd year, he collected more food. And for the 3rd year, he was collecting food every year and putting it in a big warehouse. The 4th year, he got more food. And in the 5th year, he collected maybe about 20% of all the harvest. And on the 6th year, he put it all into a big warehouse. 7th year was going to be the last year of plenty. And then after that, they would see nothing for 7 years. There'd be no more food. And so the famine started. And for the 1st year, he doled out food that they had stored up. For the 2nd year, they were passing out food. But then he saw something that surprised him. Joseph saw, well, what did he see in the 2nd year that surprised him? He saw his brothers. His brothers coming to beg for food, because the famine was just not in Egypt. The famine was also in Canaan, where he had been born. And so his brothers came, and they did not recognize Joseph. And they all saw who was in charge of the food, and they all bowed down to this great ruler that had all the food in all the land. And they came, bowed down, and begged for food. The brothers were bowing down to little Joseph. Well, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. And they didn't believe it at first, but he proved that he was their brother, and that he was going to send them home with food and have Father Israel come back to Egypt. And so Father Israel, or Jacob, who was nicknamed Israel, brought all of his 12 sons to Egypt And those are the 12 tribes of Israel. And the 12 tribes stayed in Egypt until years later when they left on an exodus with Moses. But that's another story. What I want you to remember is how the baby of a family can become the sugar daddy that saves them all. That it's not often that the baby saves the daddy and all the brothers, but it happened with Joseph. And if you can remind me that Joseph in his Technicolor raincoat was the baby of the family who became the sugar daddy, well, then we can all share some sugar babies together. So remind me about Joseph and we'll have some sugar babies together. Thank you. See you at church.